What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the NVM channel. In this video we are going to integrate FLEXFUEL technology to our G42 M240i. So when talking ethanol, we are talking about E85 in particular, but in the UK, E5 and E10 are common at the fuel stations. Now those 5 to 10% ratio is adjustable by most modern vehicles, and in some cases, like the G42 and G series vehicles, it can handle and make adjustments up to E25. Now when going beyond that, you will need some form of ethanol content analyzation for the DME or ECU to control. Now the guys in America are so lucky they can get full E85 at the fuel station, and it is actually cheaper than the 93 octane or super unleaded that they have there. Now obviously there are various adjustments that you need to make within the calibration for any ethanol content, and when working up to kind of an E40, E50 mix in the UK, that stoichiometric ratio for maximum power reduces. When I say reduces, you need a lot more fuel to burn to be able to keep the same sort of power. So a stoichiometric ratio of about 12 to 1, which means 12 air particles to 1 fuel particle, creates the best full throttle burn. But when you're talking about ethanol content, it can go all the way down to about a 7.8 to 1. So ethanol is an alcohol-based fuel additive, and it's added to most fuels to reduce any sort of knock and give some sort of cleaning abilities within the engine itself. Most older vehicles cannot cope with the ethanol content because the actual fuel itself can be degrading to the plastics and internals of fuel lines and fuel injectors. The good news is the G series of vehicles are fully FLEXFUEL compatible, so all the fuel lines from factory are very good in production, so they can withstand high contents of ethanol, although we don't advise going anything more than kind of an E50 mix because of the fuel system in the G series vehicles. And that's where the guys from Pro Tuning Freaks have excelled in manufacturing a parallel-based flex fuel sensor for the OEM low-pressure fuel pump top hat. This integrates into the OEM top hat for both G Series, F Series vehicles. This one is specific for the G42, so it taps into the outlet of the pipe. It allows for maximum fuel flow while maintaining a censored fuel flow too, so there will be no restrictions. And if you guys probably remember on our G80 M3, we had one that was in line, and we've seen a bit of a restriction once we went to a hybrid turbo where the fuel could not flow enough and put a lot of stress on the low pressure fuel pump controller. So that in itself is a work of art. It integrates to the OEM ECU and wire harness, so it has a control module that connects to both the FLEXFUEL sensor and connects to the front control module on the G series cars. So we'll go through the installation today, and we'll show you this setup on the BootMod app as well. So step one, let's get the car prepped for the installation. The first thing we need to do is take the kick panel off. This is going to be very similar to that of the G82 M4 and any other G series vehicles. It's got these little tiny clips that do kind of clip away quite easily, and if they get stuck into the car itself, you can kind of literally clip them forwards and backwards, and they should come off like that. You can place them back in so you don't lose them. These are prone to kind of breaking and snapping, so it might be worthwhile getting a few spare before you start this installation. So with that kick panel out the way, left somewhere safe, then we can take the knee airbag cover off, which is on the G series cars. It's a 90-degree turn on the two side clips, and that releases the actual lock, and then you've got to unclip the actual panel and pull it down. Now once you pull it down, you'll notice there is a speaker connection there, and also a lower light connection. Once that's unclipped, take it out of the way and put it somewhere safe. So the next thing to do is to pull the bonnet release twice, and that's so that if there's any need for access on the engine bay, you've got it there, because we're going to take this handle off. Now the G series cars, there's a little clip behind the handle which you kind of need to prise out. It's a little plastic locking clip, and then you can pull the handle off. Just below that is a T15 Torx bit that you need to remove, and then you can unclip the side panel and gain access to the front control module for you to fit the harness. So now we're ready to install the patch harness for the actual flex fuel sensor. As I said, this integrates to the OEM DME with custom calibration, allows the DME to adjust boost ignition timing based upon the ethanol content. It also gives you on-the-fly content analyzation from the actual cruise control switch, which will show you the percentage in ethanol content on the dash. So yeah, we've got to attack 2 connectors on the G series, which is connector 3 and connector 7 on the BDC module. So we have to remove the black connector from connection 7, con 7, and we align pin 1 with pin 18 on the patch harness. Once that's connected, we can then put the other side of the patch harness back in. So as you can see, the patch harness bridges onto the OEM harness to the connector plug. With that fully in and locked in position, make sure it can't be pulled out, we can connect this back up. But on the G series vehicles, we do have to get a ignition positive, and we get that from connector 3, terminal 15, pin 1. So we've got to de-pin that. Again, this patches into that, and then we can put all this back together and work on the fuel hat itself. So with pin 1 of connector 3 now removed, you can connect the red wire from the patch harness directly to it. I like to stick a bit of tape on there just so that it doesn't disconnect as we're reinstalling this back into position. So with that connected, we can now put in the other side back into pin 1 so that it works the OEM terminal 15. Slide that back in. Make sure it's clicked into place and it's locked, and the locking tab is in its reset position. So you've got to carefully put this in so that you don't disconnect this red wire when reinstalling it back in. So that's all nice and secure, everything's where it should be. We can now tuck the main harness back underneath where the OEM harness sits, so it's not going to get damaged or trapped in any way. You can stick a couple of cable ties if you're really worried about it moving, but yeah, now onto the back. So next up, we've got to lift the rear bench up to gain access to the low pressure fuel pump and its connectors. So there's a clip on either side of the rear bench, so you just got to lift it up from one side then the other, and the bench comes out nice and easy. So with the bench now removed from the vehicle, it gives you access to the carpet, so you can lift the front part of the carpet up, and then this fireproofing on top too. Once you've got access to the actual cover of the low pressure fuel pump, give it a twist anti-clockwise, and then it will lift up out the way. So now with the cover removed, you've got access to the low pressure fuel pump connector and the actual outlet for the fuel hose itself. So you have to lift up this locking tab. You can use a pick if it's easier, and then lift up the connector completely. So what we are going to do now is start the vehicle and let it run out of fuel, because the last thing we want is to take that low pressure fuel pump connector off and be sprayed with loads of fuel, because there is a bit of a pressure between the high pressure fuel pump and this connector here. So the first thing we're going to do is stick a few rags so we don't get fuel spillage under the vehicle, because this is the top of the fuel tank, so it's exposed underneath. And then we're going to push in the red locking clip first, and then push in the white locking clip on the fuel line. This releases both sides of the actual fuel connector, and then you can lift it up slowly and hold all the fuel spill on the rag that we put down earlier. Oh, that smells good, isn't it? So with the OEM fuel line now removed, you can plug in the actual FLEXFUEL fuel line, push it in all the way until it makes a positive click. Now, routing of the OEM fuel line to the flex fuel sensor requires you to twist this. If you hold the fuel line, give it a twist, it will move its orientation, and then we make the connection to the flex fuel sensor. So it's a positive click, and you can see the routing. It goes to the flex fuel sensor. It also has a bypass here if that ever gets restrictive at all, and then it goes to the OEM fuel line. Both locking connectors are in, and what we're going to do now is reconnect the OEM plug and check for leaks. So the next thing is to make an incision in the OEM harness so that it can take the actual flex fuel connector plug and run that through onto the actual flex fuel sensor and connect it up. Make sure it's positive click and it's in position, and then we can reconnect the top. And it still makes a good seal, so don't worry too much about any sort of fuel vapor. So with all that routed and ready for connection, we can connect the OEM low pressure fuel pump connector by just pushing over the low pressure pipe and making that connection, and then you can lock the locking tab down. And that's how it looks once it's fully installed. Remove any rags, and now we're going to check it for leaks by turning on the ignition, and we're checking the two positions here, one here and one there, for any sort of fuel leaks. So once we're happy with no fuel leaks at all, we can start the car, let it run for a bit and give it another quick check. We just want to make sure all locking tabs are secure and there's not going to be any sort of movement in the actual flex fuel itself. It seats really nice and it roots really nice, so we can put everything back together, locate the actual control module underneath this C-pillar, and we're good to go and flash our flex fuel custom map. With all the hardware fitted on this right-hand drive G42 M240i, we can go into the boot mod app and check the actual content of ethanol within the fuel. This is running 99 RON Tesco Momentum fuel, which should have 5% ethanol content, and it's coming up as 8%. It also tells you the flex fuel temp and the actual blend factor that we incorporate when driving this vehicle. Also, it has on the fly check. If you pull down on the cruise control button, just one click, not two, it will show you the percentage on the engine RPM scale too. Really handy to have and really cool, and we can take tuning a lot further. So just to make sure it is working correctly, we're going to actually put some pure ethanol in the tank and see how much it changes the values by, and see what sort of difference it makes on the actual ethanol content. So with the car idling, we'll check the on-the-fly flex fuel, and you can see that's gone up to about 11-12%, and we can check that both on the app as well, and you can see it has gone up to 11%. As it mixes more, it will go up, and this is the importance of adding a flex fuel sensor when mixing fuels like this. So if you enjoyed this video and it helped you in any way, make sure you smash that thumbs up button, click the subscribe button below with the bell notification icon so you don't miss a single upload from NV Motorsport. In the next video, we will be sticking E85 at different blends to see what sort of power it makes on the stock turbo. Catch you guys in the next one.